Hi there! Welcome to On the Flip Side, a podcast for anyone who wants to live their best sales life. We're going to be talking to buyers, sales managers, SDRs, and A's about things like what does it take to be a great sales manager? Or how can you go home happy month after month? So let's dive right in.
Hey Jen, so glad to have you here on The Flip Side. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's early over here, but I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Ed Porter told me that I needed to come and visit with you because you are just a great podcast host, and so I'm grateful to be here.
Awesome. And as I was going through your LinkedIn profile as preparation for the interview today, one thing that really stood out for me was just how much thought you had put into, creating your personal brand, and you had a ready to go press package. You had topics that people could reach out to you for speaking opportunities and such. And it's really intriguing, right? Because you have a full-time job. It's not like, you're doing this as a full-time gig. You were also one of the LinkedIn top sales influencers. Curious, what has your career journey been like, and what has gotten you here?
Yeah, so I actually started out in retail. I was traveling the country, setting up new stores. And my career journey then took me to the cigar industry, where I managed a cigar bar and a private smoking club, right? And so what was interesting is when I was in that role, we had a private club room, but we additionally had conference rooms in the back. And I would see the software salespeople come, and they would reserve my conference room. And so they would do their, hour demo, and then they would bring their clients into the club. They would buy them cigars. They would buy them some drinks. And the next thing you know, they were done for the day. They closed their deal. It was like everything moved on. And I'm like, man, I'm working so many hours a week managing this entire place with entertainment and bar inventory. And I need to find a new life. This is not working. So I got into software. And so that journey has been pretty amazing. I've had ups and downs being a woman, and sometimes one of the only women, right, in that environment. But overall, I'm so grateful I found the opportunity to work with, innovative companies. I brought new solutions to market, and I spent time, I started out in software when it was green screen, DOS, to seeing the evolution into SaaS and offering a SaaS solution. So it's funny when I look back and I think, I sold that green screen just as well as I sold SaaS. So it's funny. And for my personal brand, that's evolved over the years. I was actually impacted by the pandemic and decided that I needed to be super intentional about what I was going to do going forward. And so while I was doing that, I'm like, who am I? By then I'm over 40 years old. And I know the one thing about my 40s is I knew super clear, this is who I am. This is what I care about. These are the things that are valued. And so I can be super intentional. I can lay this all out and come up with what my messages are, right? What are my content pillars to be able to say, I talk about this and I talk about that, and add on to that. And the reason I do that is because I've noticed that over time that the more presence you are, the more of a digital presence you are, the more people feel like they know you, and it makes things easier. I had Morgan Ingram on my LinkedIn Live a little while ago, and we were talking about when we first met, right? And I called the episode Discovery Call Therapy. And one of the interesting
I love that
about
name.
it was, oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I'm just talking. Did you have any questions on that? I'm just going
go
on
right
here.
ahead.
Okay. So, So one of the interesting things about that is that, we had never met, and we have a discovery call. One of my peers actually invited me to this call. He had already had one call with Morgan before. So I get on this call, and it feels like I know Morgan. Morgan starts asking me questions, and I'm like, I need to tell you all the things because I feel like I know you. And I told him all the things, so much so that it felt like therapy. I think every good discovery call feels a little bit like therapy. When someone's ready to open up to you enough to tell you all the things and, not only their problems, but the impact of those problems, right? And so I realized looking back at it that part of the reason that I felt comfortable to have that conversation was because, I had felt like I knew Morgan, and that was only through his brand. So as I was creating my brand and being intentional about the topics that I talk about, I wanted to pull topics that were important to me, but also ones that were personal so that people get to know me so that when I'm having a conversation, they feel like they know me too. I thought that was just like a really interesting thing about meeting Morgan and realizing that.
That's a really fascinating story because, I'll just kind of rewind a little bit and dive into a few things that you said, right? One was the fact that, as we grow older, I think we get more clarity on what is it that we really stand for, right? And that makes it in some ways easier to also say no, right? And also to say that this is not what I stand for, right? And do you think that that kind of clarity and exposure is necessary for someone to start thinking about personal branding? Because of course, a lot of people out there today, who are using LinkedIn for personal branding are much. And do you find something missing if they don't have that kind of depth of experience and exposure?
No, I think everybody is made up of their life experiences, right? I've seen people who are younger than me with brands on LinkedIn who have crystal clarity about what they believe in and what they stand for. And it's because of the experiences that they've had that make them have that clarity, right? So if you haven't had some of the struggles, some of the women in sales have had, then maybe you don't have necessarily the experiences where you go, this is what I stand for, because, you just haven't had the opportunity to have as many negative and positive experiences. Right. And so I think, it evolves for each person, just like what the things I'm talking about today are not necessarily all the same things I was talking about a year ago. Like, as time has moved on, I've thought, okay, I want to expand into this area and that area because these are things that I either believe in, I can talk about, I'm passionate about, and every single person's journey sort of evolves based on their experiences.
And, from running your cigar room to software sales, do you see any parallels apart from maybe the fact that, both are fairly male dominated, I would assume?
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, it's always about relationship building, right? Whether it was in the cigar room, the club members all doing events and building relationships that they took from the cigar room to the boardroom, right? To the guys on the golf course who go play golf together and then take those relationships to the boardroom, right? Software is very much the same thing. You're building relationships and you're networking and you're getting to know people. And, the sum of your network and as many people as you know is as much opportunity as you can get, right? So taking those opportunities to get to know people and to legitimately, authentically, be present in the moment and not making it about you, but making it about them or what's possible, I think is super important. Now, from the male dominated aspect, yeah, that's always been a challenge that there's at some points you have to consider as a woman in sales, how you're going to reach your objective while you're communicating and start to understand the different personality types of men within that industry, within the industry, so that you can achieve your desired results. And sometimes, I remember there were times I would walk my neighborhood in the middle of the night thinking about, okay, so if I say this, they're going to say this. And if I say this, they're going to say this. And so if my desired result is here, let me completely analyze to death, how can I get to my desired results so that I can be successful. And so I don't think that men realize how much of that women need to do in order to feel like they're achieving something. I wrote an article about like being on the hamster wheel. And women tend to get on this hamster wheel, right, going as fast as they can, and they're just trying to like make room for themselves and make this place where they can be successful while still feeling valued, while still feeling heard. And you run as fast as you can, and you don't know if it's working or not until you get the feeling, right? And so you're always searching for that feeling of maybe it's belonging or inclusion, but to feel safe. So, and I don't think a lot of men necessarily have that, like they have to get that feeling because they have it from the get-go. Because if you've got over 30% of people who are all the same, you've got that feeling from the get-go. But if you're less than 30%, then you're not necessarily part of it. And, unless you get that feeling, because at the end of the day, it's a feeling. It's about how you make it. That's why I talk so often about the difference between culture ad versus culture fit.
It's really fascinating because I started out my career in investment banking, and that probably has to be one of the industries with the worst kind of gender ratio and work environments. And I think that what you mentioned, right, like one thing that happens very subtly is that when you find yourself as a minority in a situation, you become much more self-conscious, right? You're always, in some sense, uncomfortable and questioning yourselves and trying to see yourself from the lens of the other person, right? And you feel, I think, a lot more judged and evaluated, right, than you would if you were on the majority of it. And I think in some sense you mentioned that, right? Like people, what is the feeling that you get and when you are in that room full of somebody who looks and talks different from you? Do you think that, of course, there are lots of things in place to help improve that gender balance at work, but do you think there are things that men could be doing to actually make it, a little bit easier and better for women in sales?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely looking to bring more women into sales, right, and support them and offering mentorship as well as supporting women. With Girls Club, I've had the opportunity to hear, mentors that are men who, dedicate their time to really sharing their insights. And so if I go to one of the male mentors for Girls Club, and I say, I've run into this challenge, what would you suggest? Rather than me walking around my neighborhood in the middle of the night trying to figure out all the variables, right? I could just ask one of them, which is super helpful. And I think that's even during the pandemic, it's one of the things that I found is that I'm able to, like, I found more little micro communities of men that are supportive of women that I could pick their brains. I could find out their thoughts and get their feedback. So that mentorship is so important and so valuable to women to feel like there are men out there that want to listen and want to understand. Monthly, I do a ladies happy hour on LinkedIn Live. And so that ladies happy hour has got a panel of like 8 women, and they're all sharing their insights, what's top of mind for them, what challenges they're experiencing, what they've learned. And I've noticed, like, I started doing them back in like October of last year, right? And so each one I do, I notice more men. And what I love about that is that each time I do it and there are more men, is that they're gathering these ideas. They're starting to at least open up to the possibility that women think differently and that that's okay, but that those thoughts and how we're supported and it matters. With the pandemic, women have been more impacted than anyone else, right? Specifically minority women, right? And so in order for us to even get back to where we were before the pandemic, it's going to take a great deal of work and effort and understanding from allies, from organization, because a lot of women, especially mothers, have left the workforce entirely. I think I saw a McKinsey stat that so far in the pandemic, we've been set back, women as a whole, by like half a century in the progress that we made pre-pandemic. So when you think about that, how is that going to impact my daughter if 50 years is, a significant change? When she gets into the workforce, that 50 years isn't going to make a difference for her. And so all this advocating I've been doing for like women in sales and women in general, women in technology, pre-pandemic, maybe it was making some progress, right? But the reality that, it may not be different for her.
So I have a question there, right? Like of course, I've been at many women in sales events or women entrepreneurship events. And I always wonder whether, having these separate communities and events and, opportunities, does that actually further the cause, or does that just, call out the fact that there is a problem? And it in some ways, creates a ghetto of people talking about but, maybe doesn't necessarily benefit, right? Like, I come from a position where I had not, I had attended maybe one women entrepreneurship event before I went to, Y Combinator for my program. And then I realized that there was so much talk about, women founders and how they're treated differently. And I sometimes wonder that kind of just creates a bit more of a victim mindset in some sense. Like, what is your take on it? Does it further the cause? Does it maybe just make people think that they are a little bit less equal?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, right? So while I was going through the worst of my career in regards to how I felt about how I was treated within, places that I've worked, right? If I had a resource or a place to go for that support to get mentorship, it would have been super valuable to me. But I do agree that there are events that I've gone to where people have taken more of a victim mindset, right? And so I think what matters is, how each individual person takes that in, and then like, do the challenges make you a stronger person, or do the challenges make you feel and be a victim, right? And I think that's different for each person, right? So the challenges I face, I think, has allowed me to really understand a little bit better other people who are not necessarily, in the majority. It makes me feel like I've achieved more despite, some of the places I've been, some of the ways I've been treated. And that to me is one of my superpowers, because it's when you can rise above it that makes it, something that happened, but like, I don't have to, that happened back then. I can now advocate for women and make sure that more women get into leadership positions and support them however I can without necessarily having a victim mindset. Now, in the same respect, things have happened, right? And so just like anything else in life, you've had those experiences and you can run into triggers where you're like, oh no, I'm not here again, right? So, and that's not necessarily being a victim. That's just hyper self-awareness of, I want to make sure that this never happens again and that I don't tolerate it, right? So there's a difference between being a victim and saying, hey, I know what this looks like and I'm not going to tolerate anything I don't deserve, and rising above it.
Yeah, I think something that you're saying there is also about, like, in some sense, having a role model, whether that is a role model in terms of, how do I deal with this situation? How do I stand up against something that, doesn't sit well with me. And I think that's probably a big power of micro communities or communities that are around helping support special, right? Because then you kind of see somebody else who's been through that journey. And you realize that, yes, maybe the odds are stacked against me, but I know I can get there, and that gives you hope. And when you kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, it gives you maybe that extra fighting power to get there, right? And I definitely think that's a very powerful message, and that's why I think things like Girls Club, things like having people like you, Lori, etc., in the community really help, because then people naturally get something that they can aspire towards. I'm also curious, right? Like, you started out with a little bit of the personal branding thing, and I want to double click on that. One of the things that people often struggle with is, how much time and effort should they spend on creating that personal brand versus, just kind of amplifying what the company brand and messaging is. Because, of course, companies today have found out that it's much more effective for them to get their employees to talk about them and further their message than to maybe try and do that through the official channels. Right. So, what is your advice, and what are some of the interesting stats maybe that you've seen in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, the value of your people, right, is huge. For instance, like on average, team members will have 10 times more followers than any company brand, right? And they'll receive 8 times more engagement when they post about like a message that is, like a brand message. The reach of an employee is 561% more than an actual company. So at the end of the day, it's like, do companies recognize that their greatest asset is their people, and that those people have feelings and things that they're passionate about and things that they enjoy, and they have values and their own personal missions while still supporting the organization, and that all those things that make them them are a personal brand, whether they like it or not, whether organizations like it or not. Your people are your brand. And so how they go out in the world, and the more that they share and the more that they do and the more that they do so authentically, the more opportunity it creates for organizations. Just like that conversation with Morgan, where, I just pretty much shared everything just because I felt like I knew him. He never met me. There was even an awkward moment where I mentioned his vacation because I followed him on Instagram. Like, he didn't know me, right? And sometimes now I experience that, where someone will call me or they'll email me or message me, and I don't know them, but they feel like they know me. And I love that, because then, I know that they've looked at me and they followed my content, and that somehow they've felt connected to me. And I know it's going to be a fantastic conversation, right? And so the value of that is huge. And I don't think enough organizations are taking advantage of it. It's how Amazon, took over the B2C market, right? Yeah. And they did it by being fast and by connecting with their buyers where and how they wanted to connect, how they wanted to receive their product. From a B2B standpoint, organizations need to think about, how are they creating a digital buying process? How are they creating an image of themselves that is authentically that, because at the end of the day, people buy from people. People don't buy from brands. They buy from people. And, unless you're just going to a website and you're subscribing and then you're moving on. But that's not, the difference. The only reason, salespeople will stick around rather than, the robots, is because of the value they bring as a person. And that ability to be a consultative sale and to be able to lead people and help people through the sales cycle. So if you're not allowing your people to be fully present and to be out there branding and investing the time in developing those skills, then you're really missing out.
That's fascinating. Are you saying that creating a personal brand is like creating Amazon Prime delivery options in some sense? Right? Like, basically, because if you have a personal brand, you're able to accelerate that rapport building and that discovery and get to a much deeper discovery. Right? It's like you're able to maybe accelerate the whole sales cycle for the organization. And maybe that's one way for organizations to think and value the personal branding story.
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. It builds that credibility, the familiarity. It creates you as, like a resource, and a resource that's searchable, that's found, that can be added to lists about your influencers or thought leaders. It creates you as a person. While you may represent an organization, right? But it's just being more out there. So let's say maybe a organization now has got a CEO and maybe one other person who are like sort of the ones out there, the brand advocates, right? Can you imagine a team where everyone is a brand advocate and everyone's talking about the value you bring, and everyone is more searchable and everyone is more present? Think about the impact that can make over time is just huge. I think we've seen some of it with Gong. Gong is doing an amazing job of their people being present. Gravy is really good at that, doing just encouraging people to be present and out there as themselves out there on social media, and not being limited. Like, how important is innovation to sales, right? So right now it's LinkedIn. There's also Clubhouse. Are you then following your prospects on Clubhouse so that you can actually hear their voice and like start to understand what they care about? Are you taking it to Twitter where they're also coming out with audio and you can start hearing their voice? Like, leveraging all the places the people are, where you could just, where are your prospects and customers? Go be there.
I love that. I think I'm going to title this episode Amazon Prime for B2B Sales.
Oh, that's awesome.
But, I think from a company's point of view, right, the struggle then is, of course, I want my people to create personal branding because maybe that helps me further my story and my message. Maybe, you make a really interesting point. Maybe that also helps me, accelerate the sales cycle. But, how should they think about the fact that maybe that also creates a risk for you to lose someone because they have more visibility? Right? And that's something that they worry about. And also, the fact that time is a limited. And so maybe my people are spending too much time creating that personal brand, and maybe not all of the benefits of that flow to me, right? Like, I have a point of view on this, but, would love to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so just like training, right? You're not going to not train your people because they're going to get so many skills that they're going to go find a new job. It's the same thing. It's like, are you invested in your team members and your employees? Do you want the best for them? What it comes down to is your culture and your leadership. There are people who are servant leaders who, invest their time, their resources into building people up. And that creates a sense of loyalty. And sometimes people might move on, but you'll never know when they come back. And either way, you've mentored them to become the person you are. You've helped create this career journey, and all of that is good karma out into the world. Yes, there's a time work balance, right? You have certain things you need to achieve within a certain time frame, and they all need to get done. But having training, right, will help that. How much time you should invest. What are the steps you should do? Rather than people going, I might like a personal brand. Let me go figure out how to do it. Instead, maybe provide training on how the best way to do it quickly so that you can leverage it while you're still being productive. Might be also a good way to go. You lower the risk, just like anything else with workman's comp. They train people, risk lowered, insurance premiums down. Training reduces risk in all cases, just like leadership. They do leadership training to reduce risk, for retention, to make sure that people are being treated correctly. The solution to any risk is always training, I think, anyway.
That's an interesting point. The solution to any risk is training, I guess. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, yeah, people do tend to get short-sighted about these things, but it definitely makes sense to take a longer-term vision because, like you said, one is you, of course, want them to become, better at their jobs, and I think that also forces you to become better as an organization to make sure that you are an organization that's still attractive to people who are better, right? And that kind of keeps upping the bar because you don't want to lose somebody just because they became too good for you. And yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I'm curious, just as we wind this down, I love to ask everyone, what is the first thing they sold? Curious, what was that for you?
Okay, so when I was a teenager, I got a job modeling like leather jackets and like coats in New York. And, so I would walk around a mall with these jackets, like various jackets on, like handing out flyers. And then when someone said how much they liked my jacket and I let them try it on or whatever, I'd walk them back to the store and then they would buy it. Right. So I was literally a walking retail and agreed to buy it from me. Right. Walking around. It was funny. An outdoor outlet mall. Right. So if they agreed to buy the clothes off my back, they would get a discount, which, so there I am walking around the mall. Now, mind you, in winter, I might be a 16-year-old wearing a mink coat. In the summer, there I am in a leather jacket, sweating. Like odds were not good. If I'm sweating in a leather jacket, like trying to get someone to buy this jacket for me, it's not. Yeah. Odds are down. But yeah, that's the first thing I sold was like coats and jackets, walking around a retail outlet mall in upstate New York.
That's really fascinating. And I'm sure people can't find you in a mall anymore just because we're all locked down due to the pandemic. Curious, how can people reach out to you and what should they reach out to you for?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. After the little slash, it's just jferg507. And that jferg507 follows me everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, like any social media platform, you can put that number in. I've had it since I was a teenager, but it goes everywhere. So yeah, that's the easiest way to reach out to me for. And you can reach out to me if you are a sales leader and need to develop some pipeline confidence. We provide sales development resources over at Inside Out. If you are looking for a speaker or someone to talk about various topics, you can find me on LinkedIn. There's a press kit there. Or if you just want help, you're women in sales and you need someone to talk to. If you are struggling in any way, I am the kind of person who just likes to support other people. There are many times in my life where I just wish somebody would just give me a hand up or just give me some support. I've made a conscious effort to be there for other people. And so if you need help, you can reach out to me.
Thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, I know you definitely walk the talk. And you definitely support a lot of women. And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage anybody who's looking for help, either maybe on personal branding or a woman in sales, to reach out to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great opportunity.